So first off, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. I am Chip Schrader. I am the director here, and it is a pleasure to see all of your faces today and to see this this kind of interest in our Veterans Day program. So and also to acknowledge our Chief of Police here. And I would like to take a moment to thank the veterans in the room. If you are a veteran, would you mind raising your hand or standing for us? Thank you all. Thank you so much. And an important part of our programs here at the library is our land acknowledgement. So I will read that and then introduce Mark. The Scarborough Public Library acknowledges that it is located on traditional homeland, past and present, of tribes in the Wabanaki Confederacy. We recognize and honor the current tribes who comprise the Confederacy, the Penobscot, the Passamaquoddy, the Maliseets, and the Micmac, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We acknowledge the Owascoic people who once lived in what is now Scarborough. We respect the traditional values of these tribes and support their efforts for land and water protection and restoration. In offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm Indigenous sovereignty, history, and experiences. Thank you. And about Chief Holmquist, and this is where I really have to read this because his service is quite amazing, and I'll try to read it slowly so that we can appreciate all that he has done. Mark Holmquist has been the Chief of Police in the town of Scarborough since December 2021. Prior to joining us here, Mark was a 24-year veteran of the Maine State Police, where he retired in November 2021 at the rank of lieutenant. During his 24-year career, Mark served 12 years with Troop A in Alfred, conducting rural patrol in York County, and 12 years in the Major Crimes Unit in Gray. Mark was promoted to lieutenant in 2017 in the Major Crimes Unit and finished the final year of his career as the troop commander at Troop A. Mark also retired as a first sergeant from the U.S. Army Reserves in December 2021. Mark served for 25 years in the U.S. Army, Maine Army National Guard, and U.S. Army Reserves. The highlight of his military career was his service as a Sentinel at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. That was from 1992 to 1993. The majority of his Army Reserve service was in the role of Senior Drill Sergeant, assigned to a training unit especially tasked to turn citizens into soldiers during basic combat training. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed guest, Mark Holmquist.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much to the Scarborough Public Library for having me here today, as well as Steffi from Project Grace. I had mentioned to Steffi several months ago that I do these presentations several times every year, statewide. I never ask for a dime, but recently people have been wanting to make donations to different veterans groups on my behalf. And I really didn't know how to handle the whole fundraising thing, but I knew who did, and that's Steffi from Project Grace. And we have a close relationship in public safety to Project Grace. And all I did was I mentioned to her that, I do this presentation that I think will resonate well with a lot of people. If we can bring a lot of people together and get the message out and have a fundraising component to it, that I don't have to deal with any of it. If you can take that portion of it for me, and I want it to go to veterans that are in need. That's all I had to say. And I could tell the wheels were turning in her head, and within a few minutes she walked out of the PD, just presented with this information. A few minutes later she's like, don't you worry, we'll take care of it. I'm thinking already about something and I'll get back to you. And she certainly did, and was pivotal in making today happen. So, and What's also pivotal about making today happen is having you folks here. I present to groups that are sometimes 4 or 5 people, and then upwards to over 200 at certain times throughout the last several years. I've presented to basic trainees, usually about 240 of those trainees when I was a drill sergeant. I thought it was imperative that I pass along my experience in the Army to let them know that it doesn't matter what you do in the Army. Just do it at your highest capacity, at your highest level. Put everything, your heart and soul, into everything that you do for your country. Whether you're a cook, a truck driver, or a tomb guard, it doesn't matter. You give it the same effort. And that was an important message for those kids going through basic combat training. It was also important to pass on that first and foremost that they need to honor their service by being an outstanding soldier, and to always realize that there's a lot of people that came before us who wore this uniform, who raised their right hand, took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and also to defend the flag that's on their shoulder of their uniform, and to never ever take that for granted. So that was a message that I wanted to pass on to them. And also, by leading by example, by letting them know that just because I'm no longer a tomb guard, I still have a message to pass on. So even though I'm no longer in the Army, it doesn't matter. I will pass on this message as long as I can, I'm able to citizens, because it's important as veterans that our service doesn't end when we hang up our boots. Our service never ends. It's a service for life. And we need to pass on the values and the principles that we learned in the United States military to the citizens, especially our younger citizens, who may not have been brought up with those same values in mind. So that's some of the things that I talk about. I just did a presentation to a group of 8th graders in my hometown of Caribou, Maine last week. Got to see some former classmates of mine in high school who are now in faculty positions up there. And so traveled up north. It was nice to see them as well as family. But also to pass on the message to a group of 8th graders who knows, in 4 years could be raising their right hands to take an oath to serve and protect and defend our Constitution, if they so choose. All right? So, Arlington National Cemetery. First off, how many have been to Arlington? A lot of people. All right, a lot of people. Okay, good. And if you haven't had a chance to go there yet, I hope that you all get the opportunity to go. When I was growing up in Caribou, I had never gone to Washington, D.C. as a kid. I had never been to Arlington National Cemetery, although I had seen Arlington National Cemetery on TV, especially when the president laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, or, in my younger audiences get a big kick out of this, when we had encyclopedias in the library, and we had to go sit on hard wooden chairs on Saturdays and do research and try not to plagiarize too much and support our writings with good documentation, right? And so I mentioned that to the group of 8th graders last week, and I just got really, I said, so it's kind of like Google, guys, right? And they're like, oh yeah, Google, okay. So encyclopedias. But that was my only exposure to it. And I'll get into this more later, but it wasn't until I was assigned to a very elite unit, the 3rd United States Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard. It's the oldest infantry unit in the United States Army. It wasn't until my assignment there that I truly realized the magic of Arlington National Cemetery. All right? And if I get emotional today, guys, it's going to happen, all right? But that's okay. I'm in a safe group here. I'm in Scarborough. I'm good to go, all right? So Arlington National Cemetery, it's truly a place where valor sleeps. And if you've ever been to Arlington, you know what I'm talking about. As soon as you walk through the gates of Arlington, as soon as you walk through, You can go from the busy life of Washington, D.C., you cross Memorial Bridge over the Potomac River into the gates of Arlington, and all that busy city life leaves you behind, all right? You walk through those gates, you see images like this, and you can't help but feel the service and the sacrifice of those who have come before us, who gave their lives for our country, all right? That's what you see. You also see a level of care and honor that is given each and every time one of those headstones is placed. They're not placed haphazardly. Obviously, they're placed in rows. And the, just the grounds of Arlington itself is finely manicured all the time. It's impressive to see the operation down there and how they take care of this very sacred ground. So Arlington National Cemetery, it was established in June of 1864. Does anyone have any background or information on how Arlington was created? Whose property that was back early on? Yes, sir.
Was it Robert E. Lee?
It was Robert E. Lee's property, yeah. It was Robert E. Lee's property, and he lived in a house called Arlington House, the Robert E. Lee Mansion, and it wasn't until the Civil War broke out that he was basically forced to part ways with the United States Army because he was a West Point graduate. He intended to serve with the Union Army or with the United States Army, and when the Civil War broke out, he went back home to his home state of Virginia and decided to join the Confederate Army. So that's how that all happened. Arlington National Cemetery evolved from Robert E. Lee's property once it was taken over. It wasn't purchased, it was taken over by the United States government, and the Union Army took control of the house and the property around the house. And when they started to bury Union soldiers around the perimeter of Robert E. Lee's house, and that just expanded and expanded over the years, obviously he wasn't coming back to Arlington with that in mind. So it's evolved since that time to a place where over 400,000 people who have sacrificed so much for our country now rest. And it's on approximately 630 acres. And when I was there, the cemetery was a little bit smaller. It was 612 acres. And as a tomb guard in our training, we got to know each and every part of that cemetery. One of the things that we had to do in training was know where certain prominent people were buried within the cemetery and be able to find those locations in a moment's notice and be able to get back to where our tomb guard quarters were located in a really quick manner. So it involved a lot of running through the cemetery in the middle of the night, doing things that tomb guards do in training, and I'll get into more of that later. So Arlington is a special place for visitors to take a moment to reflect upon America's sacrifice for freedom. And this picture here tells a lot of stories. Wreaths Across America, I think we're all aware of Wreaths Across America. Those Christmas wreaths from Columbia Falls, Maine, that go south to Arlington National Cemetery each and every December. When I was a tomb guard, I was there from 1992 to 1993, and that was actually 92, December of 92 was the first year that the Worcester Wreath Company had brought down whatever they had left for wreaths. I heard it was a couple of possibly pickup trucks or smaller trucks that went down to Arlington to a very secluded part of the cemetery. I know the tomb guards didn't know that this was happening, that wreaths were being laid at gravestones in Arlington. I'm sure cemetery staff were well aware of it, but it was so small of an operation, none of us knew at the tomb. And to see how it's evolved over the years is impressive. So when I was a Maine State Trooper, I had the opportunity to be part of the police escort for 2 straight years. and to be able to go into the gates of Arlington with several tractor trailers full of Christmas wreaths from Maine was like coming full circle for me. As a Maine State Trooper and a former Tomb Guard, to come back to Arlington, a place that is near and dear to my heart. I love it. And then to go to a place like this, which is Section 60. Section 60 in Arlington National Cemetery is one of the primary designated sections for our veterans who paid the ultimate sacrifice during the global war on terror, all right? Who passed away in primarily Iraq and Afghanistan and other places, but this is where they're buried. So you go there for Wreaths Across America, which is coming up. If you went directly to Section 60, you're going to see scenes like this. A Gold Star mother who is camped out in front of her kiddo's final resting place. You'll see groups of people huddled around one particular stone. Still emotional today because the wounds of war for them, their sacrifice of losing a loved one is still very raw, all right? And you'll have an opportunity to talk to people. As a state trooper, I was able to talk to people along the way during Wreaths Across America, especially our Gold Star families, parents especially. And this lady here, her name's Kathy Powers. And as you can see from her jacket, she has a United States Air Force jacket on. Her son, Bryce Powers, was stationed in Japan. And he wasn't killed, due to conflict or anything like that. He was killed due to complications from having an accident in his car off duty in Japan. He stayed on life support for many months, and ultimately he ended up passing away from his injuries, but he's buried at Arlington. And Kathy is a Gold Star mom, and had an opportunity to share a whole week with Kathy, in and around the stops during the escort, and it's an honor to call her a friend. Had an opportunity to go to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier a few years ago and escort Kathy as well as another Gold Star mom onto the plaza where I hadn't been since 1998. Onto the plaza where the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is located at, and to watch these two Gold Star moms with the assistance of a brother Tomb Guard lay a Christmas wreath for the unknown soldier. Truly an honor to be able to do that. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, when I was there, consisted of 4 unknowns. Unknowns from World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. I'll get into the history of the Vietnam unknown, but the Vietnam unknown is no longer there. He was identified through advances in DNA technology in 1998. He was disinterred from Arlington National Cemetery and buried in another cemetery, which I'll get into in a few minutes. So there are 3 unknowns located there now, and where the Vietnam unknowns crypt was located at is just a marker there that recognizes everyone's service in the Vietnam War, especially those that were POWs and MIA. All right. So a little bit of a history lesson here with you today. The World War I unknown represented our nation's involvement in World War I from 1917 through 1918. The idea to have a Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, we stole it from our allies who were involved in the conflict with us. So as our allies in Europe were burying their unknown soldiers, we decided that we were going to do the same, all right? So 4 unknowns were selected from 4 separate cemeteries in France. There are many unknowns, but there were 4 unknowns selected from various cemeteries throughout France. And then a final selection was made on 24 October 1921 by a highly decorated Army sergeant by the name of Edward F. Younger. And it was a very simple ceremony, if you can see by the slide. All he did was circle the casket a few times and designated one of the caskets as being the unknown soldier, our first unknown soldier. And he simply faced the casket, stood at attention, and saluted. But when he was asked later why he he chose that particular casket, he said it was just a feeling that he had. I mean, there was no real compelling reason as to why he chose that unknown. It was just a feeling that he had in his gut that was going to be the unknown soldier. All right, the interment of the World War I unknown happened on Armistice Day, as it used to be known, right? I don't have to tell this group Armistice Day, but I tell my youngins about Armistice Day as well as Veterans Day and the difference, and how all it is the name that's changed, right? It still means a lot to us. 11 November 1921, World War I unknown soldier was buried in Arlington, with President Warren G. Harding being the next of kin. So with my younger groups, I really have to explain to them why the President of the United States would be the next of kin for the unknown soldier, because truly, this person, this soldier, is unknown. We don't know who their next of kin is, who their family is. Truly unknown, so that's why the President is designated as the next of kin. So, see if my laser pointer works here. Okay, perfect. So pointer reference, this is the tomb in the early years. It was just I guess like a base of marble. The Potomac River, Washington Monument, the Capitol, White House is over in here somewhere, Jefferson Memorial's over in this area. So that was the tomb back in the day, and it wasn't guarded at the time. But in 1926, an armed military guard was posted because folks were coming to the tomb and disrespecting the grounds. So, for example, setting up a blanket and having a picnic on the base of the tomb was something that was seen. And when veterans saw this happening, they obviously were very appalled by this and by the powers that be. Their decision was made to have an armed military guard posted at the tomb. In 1931, the tomb went over a little bit of a facelift. It was constructed to be a bigger structure, as you'll see here in a few minutes. Or if you remember from your visits there, it's quite a large piece of marble now. And it was constructed of 79 tons of white marble from the state of Colorado. Anyone here from Colorado? No? Okay. Originally? All right, the tomb. And I know it's a black and white picture, but I just wanted to show you what it looked like back in the day. So you remember that first base back in 1921? That's essentially what it looked like. These steps were put in, and then this greater structure was made. So you'll see here, and I'll have a slide coming up explaining this, but these are inverted wreaths right here on each side of the tomb. So there's 6 of them. They're inverted to represent mourning for the unknowns. All right. The 6 wreaths, 3 on each side of the tomb, represent the 6 major battle campaigns of World War I. All right. And if you've forgotten from your time in U.S. history what those, I wouldn't know them unless I was a tomb guard, but right, that bottom line there will list out all those major battle campaigns of World War I. All right. So it's a very symbolic gesture to have inverted wreaths to represent mourning for the unknowns, and to have each one of those inverted wreaths represent the major battles that produced a lot of casualties within that war. All right, so the front of the tomb, which is the side of the tomb, not where the tomb guard marches back and forth in front of, the front of the tomb is actually the side that faces Washington, D.C. All right? The back part is where the tomb guard's located at, okay? So the front of the tomb, you have the Greek figures peace, victory, and valor. And it's hard to see here, but they're holding hands, so they're unified. They're a unified front, and they represent peace, victory, and valor. So that's another symbolic gesture as to, one of the additional reasons why the tomb is so very special to us. And then on the back side of the tomb, for the visitors that go there, this is what resonates with them, among other things. But the words on the front of the tomb, on the back of the tomb, that say, "Here rests in honor and glory an American soldier known but to God." And that really pulls it in. That really tells you that the sacrifice of this soldier, not only did they give their lives for their country, but they gave their identities, which makes them so sacred that we can post a guard out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that guard from the old guard has been there since 1948. And that guard has not left those unknowns at all since 1948, through the rain, the wind, the sleet, the snow. Hurricanes, mind you, have come through, and the tomb guards have never left their post. So that tells you a lot about the men and women who guard the tomb, but even more so why we guard the unknowns. It's truly because of their sacrifice and how special that they are. That's why we're out there doing this. So, I'm no weatherman, but you know what? That does not look good, right? When the rain is coming in like that, you know, as our parents used to say, why don't you get inside before you catch a cold? Well, this is what the tomb guards sign up to do. And it's an all-volunteer force at the tomb. And we certainly thrive in weather like this. We actually prefer to walk in weather like this rather than sunny weather, because you know that you're really out there and you're protecting the unknowns, and you're in all kinds of elements, and nobody else usually is there. The visitors come in and out in weather like this, and it's good because you're out there with the unknowns as it was intended to be. So, as I mentioned before, it's been a constant vigil. In 1937, a 24-hour guard was posted. A 24-hour guard was posted at the tomb. And then in 1948, soldiers from the 3rd United States Infantry, the old guard, took charge of that mission. And prior to 1948, it was essentially, when the military guard was posted, it was essentially units from the military district of Washington, various units that would come in. They would come in on, you know, a 30-day or so rotation, and it would just be a special detail that they would get to do. They'd serve there for 30 days, and they'd rotate out, and another unit would come in, and that process just evolved and took place over the course of time. But in 1948, that's when the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, assumed the duties at the tomb. And as I mentioned, we've been there since 1948, regardless of the weather. There was, as I mentioned, the hurricane. Hurricane came through in the early 2000s. I was not there, but I had heard about it, obviously, and thought it was very impressive that the colonel of the Old Guard, the person that was in charge of the Old Guard, called down to the tomb guard quarters and said, hey, look, this weather coming through is going to be really bad tonight. We need you to leave your post. So you can just imagine what those orders were like, right? And how those were accepted by the tomb guards at the time. And tomb guards are very professional and with a lot of respect for the colonel's authority, respectfully said, sir, we haven't left our post since 1948. Don't make this weather event be the reason why we have to leave our post. Can we do anything at all? We'll put another guard up there. You know, we'll double up. We'll have shorter rotations at night, because night shifts are usually 2 hours long. It could be a long time in weather like that. And thankfully, the colonel was open to those suggestions and said, you're right. We're going to take and go ahead with that suggestion and post 2 guards upstairs on the plaza for that night during the weather event, and they got through it. Yeah, and they didn't leave our unknowns unprotected, which is bottom line the most important thing. So I like this picture right here. This picture is not me. It's a tomb guard that I may or may not know, but it doesn't matter. what this says to me is how tranquil it is to be a tomb guard, especially when there aren't any visitors there. So this is essentially a 7 a.m. walk in the morning before the cemetery opens. And my most favorite time to walk would be the 7 a.m. walk on Sunday mornings, because every other day of the week, the grounds crew is coming through and they're blowing leaves and they're doing what they need to do to make the place look really good, as they do a great job. But on Sundays, it was quiet. So you didn't hear leaf blowers, you didn't hear any of that stuff. It was quiet. You're out there with the unknowns, and the only noise that you hear are the planes flying into Reagan National Airport. That's it. And the birds, which is even better, right? So that's, when I look at that picture, that's what it brings me back to. In fact, I sent this photo to my aunt, who has a gift of painting. She does really well at painting, and I said, can you paint this for me? And she painted it, and you know, I've had this painting that she did for me for many years, and it's in my office, and it's one of those paintings that I look at, one of those things that I look at just to kind of bring me back to just serving a cause greater than my own, and just it really gets down to what's important to me, right? So when I'm thinking about budgets and different things and people calling in about speeding traffic and all this stuff and everything's coming in together and I got to produce a report for the town manager, no, we're going to slow things down and we're going to look at this picture, and I'm just going to get tranquil once again. And that picture, all I have to do is look at it, and it brings me back. So, all right, back to history. How we doing? Keeping our buddy awake? Yeah? All right, you guys are doing outstanding. Outstanding. The World War II unknown represents America's involvement in World War II from 1941 to 1945. So as you know, there are two theaters in World War II, the Atlantic Theater and the Pacific Theater. So one soldier from each theater was designated for final selection. And that final selection took place on 26 May 1958 by a corpsman from the United States Navy. His name was William Charette. And that selection took place on the USS Canberra. The Korean War unknown, and the reason why we kind of fast forward right into the Korean War unknown is because these two unknowns were on the Canberra together, all right? So on 15 May 1958, a decorated Army Master Sergeant by the name of Ned Lyle selected the Korean War unknown at a National Memorial Cemetery in Hawaii. So the Korean War unknown was placed on the Canberra, where the final selection of the World War II unknown out of those Pacific and Atlantic Theater unknowns was made. All right, and that's a photo of that event. Again, just a very simple, symbolic type of ceremony. And when I think back to the World War I selection, where Edward F. Younger took a spray of white roses and he laid it on the particular casket that he intended to be the unknown soldier. That similar ceremony takes place when a tomb guard has done their duty at the tomb. So my last walk at the tomb was 9 October 1993, and my family and friends were there, as well as the people that I worked with. And that's the only time during your last walk, or after it, that a tomb guard's allowed to show emotion while working on the plaza. So I had 4 red roses, and I was allowed to lay a red rose beside each crypt, each unknown, and then say goodbye to my coworkers and try to get off the plaza before the tears started to flow. All right, so it was very challenging, but so anyway, everything that we do at the tomb is symbolic towards our past, towards our history, and that's another way that we choose to honor the unknowns. So for each unknown, once they're selected, they are flown or taken by boat, in this case, to Washington, D.C., where they lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda. for 3 days. All right, so as you can see here, there's a joint service honor guard that's surrounding the perimeter of where these two unknowns are lying in state. And these honor guard members will, stand there for a particular amount of time and then get rotated out with, new people to come in and stand guard for a period of 3 days. It's a long time. So, as I told you, the World War II and the Korean War unknown are tied together. All right. On 30 May 1958, both of those unknowns were buried at the tomb of the unknown soldier in front of the World War I unknown. All right. The World War I unknown is the larger structure of the tomb, and then the World War II and Korean War unknowns were in front of that World War I unknown, and they were flat crypts that were in front of the tomb. President Dwight D. Eisenhower was the World War II unknown's next of kin, and if you think of President Eisenhower's service to our nation in the United States Army, being a Supreme Allied Commander of all U.S. forces, just think about being the next of kin and knowing that, his orders at some point may have led to the death of this unknown soldier, led to the demise. But you say that, and then how honorable is it to be the President of the United States and be able to represent all the veterans from that war as not only the President, but the next of kin for the unknown soldier that will mean so much to every person that either served in World War II or those who have supported those who served in World War II, and that number is huge, as you all know. The Korean War unknown, since they were buried the same day, the Korean War unknown's next of kin was Vice President Richard M. Nixon. All right, so we'll fast forward to the Vietnam unknown selection. So in May 1984, Sergeant Major Alan Kellogg from the United States Marine Corps. Do I have any Marines in the audience? Okay, that's good. That's good, because if there was someone here from the Marines, I would have said, happy birthday. Their birthday was a couple days ago, the whole thing. But it's good. Army, I know Rick's Army. Any other Army? Navy? Who's Navy? Right there, sir. All right, good. Go Army, beat Navy, right? All right. So Vietnam unknown, selected by Sergeant Major Alan Kellogg of the United States Marine Corps. That selection was made at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Then the unknown was placed on the USS Brenton and transported to California, where it was the unknown was flown to D.C. to Lyon State in the Capitol Rotunda, like the unknowns before this unknown had done. And that's a picture of Sergeant Major Kellogg right there, rendering the hand salute during the ceremony, during the selection. So on 28 May 1984, the Vietnam unknown was laid to rest at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier between the Korean War and World War II unknowns. And President Ronald W. Reagan was the next of kin. And I put this quote in this slide because with a group like this, I don't need to tell you what our veterans in Vietnam went through when they came home. I don't need to get into a lot of detail because you lived it, right? But for my younger groups, like my 8th graders from Caribou last week, I definitely had to get into detail as to why the President of the United States would say a quote such as this, all right? So again, as a veteran myself, I need to pass on what they may or may not learn in a history class, or they may or may not learn from their parents, all right? So I'm glad the President referenced this, and I thought in 3 or 4 sentences encapsulated the entire Vietnam conflict, as well, as far as how our people were treated when they came home. All right, so I'm going to read it to you. We may not know of this man's life, but we know of his character. We may not know his name, but we know his courage. He accepted his mission and did his duty, and his honest patriotism overwhelms us. Today, we embrace him and all who served us so well in a war whose end offered no parades, no flags, and so little thanks. And to be part of the generation that came home to many flags waving, many parades, many people saying thank you for your service, many people just over the top appreciative of what the sacrifice that you made, whether it was overseas or here in the States during your time in the service, to see how far this nation's come. I'm proud of that, but I'm not proud of the fact that we had to come that far. You go from World War II and the Korean War, and then in Vietnam, just due to the politics of everything, and what was going on in our country, that we, as a society, couldn't recognize the service and sacrifice the way that it should have been recognized. And I know it's likely not across the board, obviously, but for those veterans coming home, it was a lot different. And I just point that out to folks that may not know that. Certainly this group, my veterans groups that I talk to, my VFW, American Legion, I don't, obviously don't have to get into a lot of detail about that, but I do think it's important that we as veterans share these experiences, these stories that have been passed on to us, to the younger generation. All right, the Vietnam unknown, disinterment. In May 1998, the Vietnam unknown was identified through advances in DNA technology. He was identified as First Lieutenant Michael Blassie of the United States Air Force. Lieutenant Blassie was a pilot in the Air Force. He was shot down over Vietnam in May 1972 and identified in 1998. All right. He's buried at Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery in his hometown of St. Louis, Missouri. And I had an opportunity to visit with Lieutenant Blassie when I was a drill sergeant at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, for many years as an Army reservist. And I had to pass right through St. Louis many years, every year that I went out there. In my final year of serving in Missouri at Fort Leonard Wood, I said, if I don't go there now, I probably won't have the opportunity to do so. I went to the Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery. I found where Lieutenant Blassie was at his final rest, and I went to his gravestone. It was a hot July day. There was a nice warm breeze blowing, and there was no one else around but him and I. So it was really nice to be able to know that he was the unknown soldier when I was at the tomb serving, and we had spent many nights and days together. But just to have a few moments with him was just something that I'll never forget. I went over all of this. Yep, I did. Geez, not too bad, right? Not too bad. Finally getting this stuff down. That's a picture of Lieutenant Blassie on the left. Yeah. And then a picture of his headstone. And one of the things that, each unknown is awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, because truly we don't know how they died. It could be an accident. It could have been something where they're trying to save the lives of others and ultimately met their demise. We don't know. So they are awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. But once he was identified, the circumstances of his death more so known, and this is how powerful that medal is. All right, it's definitely earned and not given away. So how he died was honorable, yes, but for the Congressional Medal of Honor, it didn't meet the criteria for selection. So that medal was stripped from his name. And some folks were, especially family members, were upset that had happened, but truly the integrity of the medal and those who wear it, and the many people that didn't have an opportunity to wear it because they died while trying to save the lives of others and were nominated for the medal posthumously, then the integrity of the metal, bottom line, is everything. So I get both sides, but ultimately that metal, the integrity of it has to remain. So the tomb guards, we're small but mighty, right? There's a small group of, at the time that I was there, it was all men, all infantry soldiers who served at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. In 1993, about a month after I left the Tomb of the Unknowns, the first female guard started training there, and I don't know the exact count, but since 1993, there have been, I would say, close to 15 to 20 female tomb guards who have served there. All right. It's a small group. We were authorized, our authorized strength was 27 soldiers. We didn't come nearly that close. We didn't have the numbers. You know, we were always running short, it seemed. To be a tomb guard, you have to volunteer to be a tomb guard, and there's about a 75% attrition rate. So those who start training, only 25% make it through. All right. So the full platoon is broken up into 3 separate reliefs. Those reliefs are broken up. They're like teams. They're broken up according to height. So first relief, all the tall guys, all right? All the ones that are 6'3" and up, okay? Second relief, that was my relief, 6'1" to 6'2", all right? And then the short guys, 6 feet to 6'1", all right? You had to be 6 feet or more back then. The standards have kind of changed a little bit, just because of they can't get people to want to be tomb guards, believe it or not. And then also having female tomb guards there, you know, you have to kind of get the height requirements to go down a little bit. But the bottom line is we want to try to have each member of that relief look uniform in their appearance, whether it's height, weight, just the way that they carry themselves. Uniformity is everything at the tomb. What's also everything at the tomb is perfection, and we all know that perfection cannot be attained. And that's something I try to reinforce with the groups that I talk to, especially those young soldiers, that you don't have to be perfect. At the tomb, that was the expectation. But I think in so many words that perfection just meant I need you to do your very best each and every day. I need you to do your very best each and every day. As long as you do your best and you give me all you've got, not only while you're here on duty, but when you're back at the barracks and you're, you know, 18, 19 years old and all you want to do is go hang out with your buddies. No, if you want to be a tomb guard, you have to be studying. You have to be shining your shoes. You have to be pressing your uniform. You have to be polishing your brass. You have to be walking through 612 acres of Arlington National Cemetery so you know where all those prominent folks are buried, so that when they tell you to go to a certain headstone, you know exactly where you're going, not during the daylight, but during the darkness of night. And time is of the essence, because if you don't meet the time hack, you have to do it all over again, all right? There are several poems that a tomb guard has to memorize, all right? One of them is the Sentinel's Creed. Line 6 of the Sentinel's Creed says, "My standard will remain perfection," all right? It just means that you need to give us all you've got while you're here, all right? A typical tomb guard serves usually between 18 months as a minimum when I was there, upwards to 3 years, all right? Thankfully, I was allowed into the platoon. I only had 14 months left in the Army. So I was allowed to begin training with just 14 months left. The standard is perfection. Attention to detail is absolutely everything. Attention to detail. And you take those lessons when you're that young and you bring it into college life afterwards, and attention to detail comes in great when you have to go through, an essay that you have to write, but it's not too good when you want to go out with your buddies and you're so concerned about attention to detail that you've been detailing your car. You know, I had a Ford Mustang, and that thing was the shiniest thing on the block. But my buddies are like, hey, are we gonna go out, or are we gonna shine tires all night? So it's a double-edged sword sometimes. But I like this photo because not only does it show you that tomb guards guard the tomb during every type of weather, this soldier is likely out in the middle of the summer. It's very humid in Washington, D.C. You have a 100% wool uniform on, which makes things even better. There's not a lot of breathability in those uniforms. So on days like that, in July and August in Washington, D.C., Arlington Cemetery, once you change the guard, you go outside, and within 5 or 10 minutes, you can feel that everything underneath that wool uniform is soaking wet. And I've only been out there for 5 or 10 minutes, okay? Barely got through the guard change, okay? So that being said, having that duty-driven focus to maintain your composure and your discipline while standing on a black mat when it's 100 degrees with the humidity, and you can feel your feet heating up, and you can feel the kiwi on the shoe polish on your shoes melting off, you know it is. So the hours that you put in the day before to get those shoes up to par, to be able to go out and guard the unknowns, all that hard work is gone within a walk or two because of the heat, all right? So, which means you don't just get to walk around with unshined shoes the rest of the day. You have to go back down in the quarters, get out your can of kiwi, shoe polish, and you need to start trying to get them back up to shine again. You have to repress your uniform. You have to do a lot of things in the heat that we don't have to do in the wintertime so much. So that duty-driven focus, doesn't matter what that weather is, this soldier right here has a laser focus on what he needs to do to properly guard the unknown soldier. And a lot of people ask me, do you ever get, or did you ever get bored when you guarded the unknowns? And I tell them, no, I don't. Because if you're truly out there for all the right reasons, you're trying to get better each and every step. So if I'm walking and I'm marching in front of the tomb and I can see my visor wiggle a little bit, that means I'm not smooth on my feet. I need to be smooth on my feet so I look like I'm on like one of those escalators or whatever you see in the airports. One of those people traveler thingies. What are they called? Makes you glide, basically. All right, makes you glide, okay? That's not the case. If my visor is bouncing, I know I need to get smooth on my feet. If I can hear the bayonet attached to the end of my rifle, if I can hear that rattling a little bit, that means either I'm not smooth on my feet, or it means I need to lock in my elbow into my side a little bit more, or maybe position the rifle a little bit to the left or right to get that rattling to stop, all right? All those small little minute corrections from head to toe is the reason why if you're there for the right reasons, you're not gonna get bored being a tomb guard, all right? That standard of perfection is driven into us in all aspects of this honorable post, in all aspects, everything. Whether it's, hey, tomb guard, you need to shine the base of that flag right there. I need you to take a can of Brasso and you need to shine that until I tell you to stop shining. We're gonna do the best that we can shining that base, all right? Or if it's go outside and guard the unknowns and do it the best you can. Doesn't matter, all right? That level of perfection, that standard is always there, that duty-driven focus. All right, it's sacred duty. As I mentioned, we're out there protecting the unknowns because they gave up not only their lives, but their identities for our freedom. We maintain as tomb guards that constant vigil that has happened ever since the old guard took over in 1948. So my bright and shining moment, this is a moment that I talk about each and every time that I do this presentation. And it's not something that I did at all. It's something that was given to me. It was a gift, truly, by a Vietnam veteran. I told you that tomb guards served in all kinds of weather. And it was right around Veterans Day of 1992. I was still in training. I was about 4 months into my training. and it was an early morning walk. I had just been posted onto the plaza, onto the mat, and the other two tomb guards that were taking part of the changing of the guard had already gone downstairs into the tomb guard quarters. So I was out on the plaza. The rain that day was coming in sideways. I mean, it was coming down hard to the point where I was out there for several minutes. I had a raincoat on, but everything from my knees down to my feet were soaking wet, and that was only within a few minutes. So I knew it was going to be one of those walks. And in November, a tomb guard has to serve winter hours. So winter hours is an entire hour that you're out in the elements, all right? Summer hours, you're only out there for 30 minutes due to the extreme heat, okay? So I'm out there. I know I'm out there for an hour. I'm already soaking wet, but that's all right. That's what we get paid to do. The visitors, there are very few visitors that morning that chose to watch the changing of the guard. As soon as the guard change was over, they scurried onto the tour bus and off they went to another location within the cemetery. That was okay, because I'm not there to impress them. I'm there to guard the unknowns. So I'm walking back and forth, and several minutes after the guard change, this gentleman is coming up the hill. He's in a wheelchair, and as he gets closer, I can tell he's a double amputee. His legs are gone, have been amputated. And I can also tell he's a Vietnam veteran. He has a hat on that symbolizes his service during that war. And he's got a flag that's affixed to the back of his wheelchair, and I can see that flying proudly behind him. So as he comes up, again, the wind and the rain is crazy. He comes up, he wheels up so that he's perfectly centered on the Vietnam unknown, and he just pivots that wheelchair around, and that's where he sits, right in front of the Vietnam unknown, so he can have that unknown right there in front of him. So I'm walking back and forth, and a few passes by, I can hear that he's emotional. He's having a very emotional moment. So a lot of things in my 19-year-old mind at that time, I'm thinking about a lot of things. I'm thinking this could be this veteran's first and only trip to Arlington. You know, he's coming up here in the driving rain. Who else would do that, right, other than tomb guards? It could be someone who lost somebody during the war, likely lost a bunch of buddies during the war, could have buddies that are still on a battlefield or in a jungle somewhere in Vietnam that may not have come home, all right, whose family is still wondering. A lot of things are going through my mind as I'm walking by him, and I can hear him sobbing. One of the last times I walk by him, I can see that he renders the hand salute, and he says, "Thank you for guarding my friend." And I'll tell you, being a 19-year-old kid from Caribou, Maine, I thought I had a pretty good value system. And I thought I went into basic training having a really good, solid value system, which I did. I thought my drill sergeants taught me everything I needed to know about values. I thought when I got to the tomb, my tomb guard trainers had taught me everything that I needed to know about being a tomb guard. I thought I truly got it. But it wasn't until that very moment, folks, that veteran, in so many words and through his actions, in just a few minutes, taught me more about honor and more about why I was a tomb guard than any of those experiences that I had lived up to that point, and anything my trainers could have taught me within a few minutes. And that's why it's so important that our veterans not only live a life of honor and through values, but they also pass on those values to others. Because without this gentleman, I mean, I would have got it eventually, obviously, but without this gentleman doing what he did for me that day, who knows? I might have had a different perspective on my service there. So tomb guards, as I said, are all volunteer. They all volunteer for this specialty platoon within the ranks of the Old Guard. Now, the Old Guard has the United States Army Drill Team. We have the Continental Color Guard. We have the Caisson Platoon. We have the guys that couldn't march very well, they ended up being in the reconnaissance platoon. They basically hung out in the field all the time, all right? But those who could march were designated on ceremonial duty, all right? We performed arrivals and departures at the Pentagon, at the White House, of different diplomats that came through. So did a lot of missions. Also, very important mission, the primary mission of the Old Guard is to make sure you honorably lay to rest those who have given so much for our country. So funerals at Arlington National Cemetery, as well as the cemeteries in and around the military district of Washington. That, in a nutshell, is what the Old Guard has for a mission. So being part of a specialty platoon within the tomb, within the Old Guard as a tomb guard, I knew it was going to be a huge tasking, all right? When I first arrived at the tomb, like I said, I had never been there before, and it was day 2 of training that they called new man training at the time. It's basically they take all the new soldiers in the Old Guard and they put them into a 2-week training to make sure that they have the basics before they go out and do these various ceremonies that I just described to you. So the second day of that training, they put us on a tour of Washington, D.C. I'm taking it all in because I had never been there before. The last stop on that tour is Arlington National Cemetery, and the last stop of that cemetery tour is at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And I watched a Sentinel who walked across that mat, who looked like he was on roller skates. He just was gliding the entire time. And I was just taken back by his professionalism, how he appeared as a soldier, and I knew at that moment that I wanted to be one of these soldiers, no matter what it took. All right, I wanted to be a tomb guard. And lo and behold, the Sentinel that I watched that day and was in awe of ended up being my primary trainer when I became a tomb guard. Yeah, so it took me a while to be able to tell him that because he was kind of intimidating, and I didn't think we were quite at that level yet that we could share stories, but so that's how I ended up at the tomb. I was assigned, actually I left that very tour, and I went back to my barracks and talked to my squad leader, who was my supervisor. I said, hey, I just went to the tomb. That's what I want to do. How do I get there, like, on Monday, right? Being 19 years old and thinking I can do everything just like that. He said, wait. He said, if we sent you down there right off, you probably wouldn't last long. You need to learn what it's like to be an Old Guard soldier first. And then, if you prove yourself worthy, it's truly earned and not given. If you prove yourself worthy, we'll send you to the tomb, all right? And we'll see how you make out, because he knew what the attrition rate was. So that was great advice from a pretty young non-commissioned officer to take me aside and say, no, we're not sending you yet. You need to go out and perform ceremonies. So that's what I did. I spent 9 months in a firing party platoon. So we were the ones who rendered the 21-gun salute at various funerals, and evolved to the squad that was called the First Presidential Firing Party. So the First Presidential Firing Party is the firing party that would have been tasked with firing the 21-gun salute for the President of the United States if he or she would have died in office. All right. So pretty big deal. You have 7 soldiers and 1 non-commissioned officer who's in charge of us, and his only job was to make sure we were all in unison. That 7 soldiers, when they pulled the trigger, sounded like 1. It can be done. It's very rare, but it can be done, and it's a beautiful thing when we can pull off a ceremony like that for a soldier who has given so much. So I've already touched upon, once I got to the tomb, I volunteered to be there. I was assigned to a temporary training rotation. That was 2 weeks long. I proved myself halfway worthy at that point. I was trainable. They put me into a full training rotation, and that's where I spent 4 months of time in training. It usually takes 6 to 9 months of intense training, but I think they looked at when I was supposed to get out of the Army, And I had proven myself worthy at that point that they wanted to keep me, so they decided to accelerate me through, I guess, I don't know. I tell you folks, I lived and breathed being a tomb guard. I didn't do a thing for 4 months. My buddies were going to the movies, you know? They were going out to Washington, D.C. to see the sights. No, this kid from Caribou was in his barracks, all right? He was in his barracks shining shoes for multiple hours on his off time, you know? Studying, doing all the different, you know, walking around the cemetery and different things that I've mentioned. So truly, you got to be all in to be a tomb guard. You can't go there thinking that it's just going to be easy and you'll be able to hang out and do all the things that you wanted to do. And I felt really bad for those soldiers that I went through tomb guard training with, who were actually fathers, who had little kids at home and wives and different things that, you know, they had a different life, and I didn't. This is all I had. That's it. As long as they fed me 3 times a day, they gave me my uniforms, and they told me where to be and when, I was good. That's all I needed. I was good. So this is, once you get through your training, you have to pass a test that's pretty rigorous. First off is a uniform test. The uniform test, you get inspected from head to toe, making sure that everything is just perfect on the uniform, everything. So all the brass that's on the uniform comes off. The tomb guard has to shine that themselves. They have to put it all back onto that wool uniform in exactly the spot that it needs to be in. It can't be a little bit off. It can't be, because the standard is perfection, all right? It's unacceptable to be any less than that for the unknowns. That uniform that you wear doesn't get sent to the dry cleaners to be pressed. It's actually the tomb guard who gets to press that uniform on their own. So we had industrial size presses that you'd see in the dry cleaners that we would go into the basement of the barracks, and we would make sure that these were wrinkle free, as well as tailored to the individual's body. So I was pretty thin back then, so we all had to put in pleats on the back of our uniform. We had to press those in. You couldn't sew them in and cheat. You had to actually press them, and they had to be exactly on the seam. You had to take a steamer once you took the uniform off the press, because the steamer would produce a little bit of a shine sometimes if you baked it too hot, and you had to take a steamer and just kind of take out that shine, because once the sun hits the shine on that blue uniform, it really doesn't look good, all right? So that's just the uniform portion. The outside portion is your marching and how you move that M14 rifle around. The M14 rifle weighs 11 pounds. My arms are not that big, and back then they weren't very big at all right? But it's all in how you leverage that rifle. And each and every tomb guard had to put in training, had to put in 8 hours of mirror time each and every day with the rifle. So basically what that means is you stand in front of a mirror, a full mirror, and you just practice moving that rifle from shoulder to shoulder and doing all the movements that you would do when you guard the tomb. That's all you do for 8 hours. Now, it doesn't have to be continuous hours, but you have to keep a log, and it has to be 8 hours. And if it's not, then you owe a lot of push-ups, or you'll get bigger arms, right? All right. So that's part of the marching sequence, the outdoor, I guess, test. And then the big one is the written test. So all the knowledge that we had to study for the multiple months that we were there, all the knowledge had to be first recalled 15 minutes before every guard change. So before every guard change, every new tomb guard had to run out into what was called the ready room. It was kind of like an open room where all the trainers would sit, and they'd eat pizza and watch movies and things. We weren't allowed to eat pizza or watch movies, okay? We were basically told to stay in the kitchen, and when we were needed, they'd call on us. But 15 minutes before every guard change, we'd sprint out into the ready room. We'd get into a corner called the knowledge corner. We'd stand at attention, and depending on how many people were there in training with you, it could be 4 or 5 soldiers. Only one soldier is going to get that walk, if anyone earns it. So you had to request permission to earn the walk. Everything is earned at the tomb as a new person. So you'd stand in the knowledge corner, you'd request permission to earn the walk, and then the tomb guard trainers would fire off questions to you of all that knowledge that they provided to you that is need to know. Once they provide you with the packet of information, that's on you to learn it. And the quicker you learn it, the better off it's going to be on you. So if you were worthy enough and you answered their questions, not only answered them, but also showed a high level of motivation when you answer these questions and recite the poems that they've asked you to recite, then and only then will you earn the walk. Now, the caveat with that is you don't have a lot of time once you go through that entire course of questioning. And you usually have 3 minutes to get from whatever uniform or civilian wear that you're wearing to full-blown dress blue uniform, hat, sunglasses, gloves that are soaking wet. Now you have a little bit of help. Your buddies are helping you wet your gloves and what have you. Shoes, everything. The ceremonial belt that goes on your waist. There's a particular way to put that on, all right? So all those things have to happen within 3 minutes time. And all the stuff that you had on doesn't get to get dumped on the floor. It needs to be hung on a hanger and thrown in your wall locker and secured. Because if not, that was something you'd have to deal with later. But so 3 minutes. So when you would hear a tomb guard come up to a new tomb guard and say 3 minutes go, that means it's on. You gotta go fast because tomb guards are never late, ever late. But there's a particular reason why it was 3 minutes, and it's not for hazing or any type of other purpose. It's truly, we train that way because if a tomb guard has an issue on the mat while they're guarding the unknowns, if they don't feel well or something's going on and we needed to get another soldier suited up to get up there and help out that tomb guard, you needed to do it quickly. So 3 minutes go is there's a rhyme and a reason to everything at the tomb, and that was the reason behind it. All right. So getting back to the tomb guard identification badge, once you pass through your training, your knowledge, the knowledge is huge. The more you study, the better off you're going to be because you have to get 90% or more on that written test. And to be able to earn the study guide, you have to go on what's called these night missions, where you have to run around the cemetery and find all these multiple places where prominent people are buried, and then you have to get back within a 3 or 4 hour time period. That's just to earn your papers, your study papers, to be able to study for the test, number one. Once you get the papers, you realize that there are 300 questions within this study document that you have to memorize. Now, you have to memorize each and every answer, okay? They only select 100 of these questions out of the 300 question study guide. Not only do they only select 100, but they also expect you to write verbatim what those answers are. And they throw in where there should be punctuation, they remove the punctuation, all right? They throw in the occasional misspelling, all right, just to drive home the fact that attention to detail is everything. And don't take it for granted that you know this information. Not only do you have to know it, but you have to know how to write it. So there was no A, B, or C multiple choice answer on this test. So again, you had to score 90% or more to pass the written portion of this test. So truly to earn this Tomb Guard identification badge, really it's quite a process. This is the second least awarded badge in the United States Army, behind the astronaut badge. And I've never seen an astronaut badge. There are very few Tomb Guard identification badges that you'd see. Since 1958, when the first badge was awarded, since 1958, there's been approximately 700, and I think they're between 750 and 760 right now, 760, that have been awarded since 1958. My badge, I was proud to receive it, proud to earn it on December 7th, 1992, Pearl Harbor Day. All right, meant a lot to me to get to be able to receive my badge on Pearl Harbor Day in honor of those veterans. So, the badge itself is sterling silver. As you can see, this might look familiar to you. It's an inverted wreath to represent mourning for the unknowns. We have our friends' peace, victory, and valor. The Greek gods. You have the outline of the World War I unknown, and then honor guard is just who we are. All right, the Sentinel's Creed. Little background on this soldier right here that you're looking at. His name was Staff Sergeant Adam Dickmeyer. He's buried in Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery. He was killed in Afghanistan in 2010. And he's buried in Section 60. And I didn't know Sergeant Dickmeyer. His badge number was 528. Mine's 394. I didn't know him, never served with him. He came quite a few generations after me. But it doesn't matter because I know we were trained the same way, under the same standard, for the same reason, and it's for the unknown. So he'll be a brother for life, right? The Sentinel's Creed, as I mentioned to you, line 6 of the Sentinel's Creed says, "My standard will remain perfection." The Sentinel's Creed is something that we all live by as tomb guards. I don't recite it every day, all right? I did back then, but I don't now. But I'll tell you, I live, or I try to live, that creed among the other creeds that I learned in the Army. I try to live that creed, all right? So I'm going to share it with you today. The Sentinel's Creed. My dedication to this sacred duty is total and wholehearted. In the responsibility bestowed on me, never will I falter. And with dignity and perseverance, my standard will remain perfection. Through the years of diligence and praise and the discomfort of the elements, I will walk my tour in humble reverence to the best of my ability. It is he who commands the respect I protect, his bravery that made us so proud. Surrounded by well-meaning crowds by day, alone in the thoughtful peace of night, this soldier will in honored glory rest under my eternal vigilance. The Sentinel's Creed. All right, it's very short, it's very to the point, but it means so much to each and every one of us. You know, it's funny to watch the transition where you're new in your training and you recite the Sentinel's Creed just because you're being asked to say it, and you don't say it loud enough ever, right, when you're a new person, and you don't always get the words right. But once you start believing in what you're saying, and you start getting louder because you're proud of what you're saying, because you know that when you go upstairs, you represent the unknowns, you represent the United States Army, and everybody who has served in this uniform, all right, you serve a lot of people. And to be able to honorably represent the unknowns, that's when the power of the Sentinel's Creed really comes out, and you feel every word, and you live it. Not only when you're there, when you have your bright and shining moment, whatever that might be. Not only when you're there, but also when you leave, all right, most importantly. If I had a rifle here with me today, I haven't practiced in a long time, all right? Bringing a rifle into public places, especially here in Scarborough where it's against the law. I don't want to get Scarborough PD coming after me. But if I was allowed to have an M14, which we have at the PD, our Honor Guard members carry M14s, I would be able to show you a few things. I might ask the first 2 rows to step back for your own safety, but no, I 30 plus years later, what, 30, I don't even know, 32 years later, I'm still able to do this. You know, it's just a muscle memory that was driven into me by doing those 8-hour-a-day mirror times, as well as night hours when we're asked to, you know, walk in a non-ceremonial manner in the middle of the night for 2 hours. We had 2 2-hour shifts at night as tomb guards, and that's when we were expected to just work on our manual of arms, to work on our marching, and also to keep your head on a swivel so that any threats that might come and harm the tomb in the middle of the night, you could take care of those things. So anyway, it's muscle memory. It's driven into me. If I had a rifle in front of me, I'd show you. But you can go to YouTube and see all kinds of soldiers doing it for real, right? If you're curious. Everything is based on the number 21. The 21 gun salute is basically where that number comes from. So 21 steps on the black mat. You stop, you click your heels, you face the tomb, face Washington, D.C. You wait 21 seconds, you face back down the mat, you do a shoulder change, all right? because the weapon always needs to stay closest to the threat, which is the public, all right? You do a shoulder change, you wait another 21 seconds, you take another 21 steps, and you repeat the same sequence at the other end of the mat. That is essentially what it is. It sounds easy, doesn't it? But again, it comes right down to the head-to-toe analysis each and every step. And that's why tomb guards are the way they are. So an organization that I belong to, it's the Society of Honor Guard, Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It's just a bunch of just has-been tomb guards who, right, who belong to this organization. We get together every once in a while for reunions and what have you. But the slogan is that they have, that represents that particular group, is soldiers never die until they are forgotten, and tomb guards never forget. And so that's a picture of my visit to Lieutenant Blassie. It's actually my hand there. I didn't borrow anyone else's. So I've got a little, what do you call it, bracelet or whatever. It's actually got the grid coordinate, or the latitude and longitude to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier on that. And it's made of sterling silver, so I don't wear it often, but I wear it for moments like this. And then on the right, can't see it, but that's Staff Sergeant Adam Dickmeyer's grave at Arlington in Section 60. Badge number 528. All right, at the bottom, at the base of that stone, is a picture of Sergeant Dickmeyer when he was changing the guard, as well as a replica of the tomb guard identification badge. So what you're seeing here is when I was my first year as part of the Wreaths Across America escort, a member of the Maine State Police. I was a sergeant at the time. Very proud moment to not only be able to be on those hallowed grounds once again and represent not only tomb guards but the Maine State Police, but to go there and to pull that wreath away from his stone and see his stone for the first time, just not a lot to me. So I could go on and on about some of the experience that I've in conversations and things that I've seen throughout the years with Wreaths Across America, and it just wasn't the 2 years that I was on the escort. It's every year that they've asked me to come back and either speak at different events for them, or, like I said, escort 2 Gold Star moms down onto the plaza for their first time to lay a Christmas wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. All right, tomb guards, never forget. If you're curious about learning more about the tomb guards, probably the best documentary that I've ever seen was created in 2016 by 2 former tomb guards. And that documentary is called The Unknowns, and you can find that on YouTube and through various other ways that you get videos. But The Unknowns, I think it's about an hour and a half long, but it will dive into a lot greater detail than I was able to share with you today about the history of the tomb, about the old guard, but essentially the training that it takes to be a tomb guard and the level of dedication that it takes. All right. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions if you have any. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you for this presentation. Thank you for the presentation. I've been in tears most of the time. I have a son-in-law who's buried, who was in Iraq and Afghanistan, and maybe you were in the 21-gun salute.
Yeah.
And that ceremony was magnificent. It was so magnificent. So I have many questions, but because of time, I'll probably ask them quietly. But one thing I wondered about is, do you miss it? Do you wish you were still there?
I'm still waiting for them to call me. So I still have one more walk left, I feel that, and I think I'm still thin enough to be able to do it. I miss it, but a tomb guard's, career cannot last forever. And the reason behind that is that standard of perfection. So when I hear that we can't get the amount of people at the tomb to serve there, it really breaks my heart, because truly, I could think of doing nothing else in the old guard when I saw what that mission was all about. But to hear that tomb guards either elect to or are forced to stay a lot longer than they wanted to, stay upwards to 3 years, that's a long time to live to that standard. So not only is the soldier cheating themselves by extending out that career, I feel, anyway, this is my own personal feeling, but that standard cannot be achieved. You can't keep up with that pace for 3 years and expect to be providing the level of service that you need to provide to the unknowns. That's why I think 18 months is perfect. I know it, you know, when I left there I was 20, so I know what I felt like, the aches and pains that I had at 20 years old, mind you, just from maintaining that rigid posture and just walking back and forth, clicking my heels multiple times per day. Yeah, so, but if they called me today, I tell the town of Scarborough I'll be back. I got some unfinished business, right?
Well, just one quick thing. What, does anybody ever pass out, and what happens? I mean, you have somebody in reserve, but that must be awful for that person that passes out.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it's a question that I get, you know, from time to time. But if it never happened when I was there that somebody passed out, but they did feel ill. I've had some instances where some of my fellow soldiers felt ill. So that's when that 3-minute drill, 3-minute go drill kicks in, and you get someone suited up to get up there to change your guard quickly. So if that did happen and a soldier passed out, the rule at the tomb is that if that rifle hits the plaza, which is anywhere within your post. Now your post consists of, within the perimeter of the chains that are there at Arlington, if you remember, if you've gone, there's chains that are around the entire area, around the tomb. So if that rifle hits the ground on any other portion of the plaza, other than the portion where the soldier actually gets inspected, it's called the inspection block, that's the only time the weapon can actually hit the ground. If the weapon hits the ground in any other place but the inspection block, that's disrespectful to the unknowns, and whether you're sick or not, or you have a mishap and the rifle just slips out of your hands one day, you have a momentary lapse of concentration, that weapon hits the ground, it's, you know, considered dishonorable and disrespectful to the tomb, and you'll be asked to pack your bags and leave. So you get sent back to the old guard, which isn't a bad thing, but under those circumstances, it's not the best. So if you break composure, if you smile, if you cry, if you whatever, if you smirk, anything other than just don't, like that duty-driven focus slide, if you have anything other than that face, then you'll be asked to leave. So you're there, you're a solemn representation of the service and sacrifice of the unknowns. And you're not there for your own personal reasons, you're there for the unknowns, and that's the bottom line behind keeping that demeanor.
Yes, sir. How do you maintain that magnificent gait, considering 21 steps, and you're flowing on air or on the waves? How can you maintain that, and how do you just do that? I've seen it. You got to walk on the outside of your shoe,
Right.
sort of. Is
Yeah.
that right?
You're absolutely right. You've studied well, because the way your feet hit the ground, it's at first, anyone who's been in the military knows that you have to step off with your left foot first every time. You step off with your left foot first, and you point your toe, and then you just flick your toe back, and you just roll from your heel on the outer edge of your foot and down, and then you repeat it with the other side, so that you just string it together. So by walking like that, you're basically a shock absorber for all the natural, just I guess, steps that, you know, movements that you take when you take steps like that. If we're out walking down the middle of Route 1, we're going to walk differently than we would when we're marching like that. It's a concerted effort to be smooth on your feet and march from the waist down, all right?
And so
Takes
you're
a lot of
actually,
training, a lot of practice.
you're actually flowing along there, sort of.
Yep.
And within the 21 seconds also, you have to keep that in your mind.
Yeah, so 21 seconds, that's interesting because, like I said, as new people at the tomb, we were basically sequestered to the to the kitchen. Well, they'd ask us to make sure that you count 21s and you practice that. And one of the techniques that they told us to use was you have a microwave in there, set the timer for 21 seconds, do an about face and turn so that you can't see the timer, and have your buddy hit the timer and count 21s and keep repeating it. So that microwave, timer on the microwave was going off all the time, right? So, and you know, I'm 30 plus years removed from the tomb. I do that occasionally. Right? I'm like, yeah, what better, I don't know how much this chicken and broccoli needs to warm up again, but I'm gonna select 21, and then I'm gonna turn around, and I'm gonna see if I still got it. But also the crowd sometimes helps you with that, especially younger kids. They'll stand outside of the perimeter, and they'll have their watches out. And they'll be with their friends, right, or their brothers and sisters, and they're watching, and then as soon as they hit 21 on their watch, they wanna see if the tomb guard's stepping off. And they pop up like this. So as long as I'm within 1 or 2 seconds, I'm good, right? So, yeah.
Are there any female?
Any females? Yes. Yes. Like I said earlier, I don't know what, I have to research the exact number of females because I get asked this all the time, but I think there's upwards between 15 and 20 female soldiers who have served there. And one of the greatest thrills of my life is being able to bring my kids to Arlington for the first time and have them watch the changing of the guard. And as a tomb guard, I'm allowed into the quarters from time to time to give a tour with my family. So I brought my son and daughter there for the first time. I think my son was, he was probably 10, and my daughter was 7. And she stood next to me as a female tomb guard came out. She was actually the sergeant of the guard for the day. She was coming out to change the guard. And my daughter was so impressed by that. She looked up at me and she's like, "Dad, girls can do this too?" I said, "Yes, absolutely." She said, "Well, I want to be a tomb guard." So that lasted for about 2 weeks. We had to learn how to march in the kitchen, and we had to learn how to do heel clicks, and still have the video. It's really cute. But she no longer wants to be a tomb guard.
How about your son?
Son, no, he's already in his mind transitioned to go to college. My son's in the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. He went to college for 1 year and came home and said, "I don't know what I want to do, but I don't want to study finance. I don't want to spend any more money, and I don't want to go back to Florida." I said, "Great, I have a place for you." I said, "You can go talk to a recruiter." I said, "And you can join any service but the United States Army." And he's like, "Okay." So he came home with an Army recruiter's card, and he's been in for almost 2 years now. So. But he had initially thought he wanted to be a tomb guard as well, and the way it is nowadays, you're not selected right out of basic training. You have to be actually assigned to a unit like the 101st for upwards to a year before you're even considered. And just the timing of, he only wants to be in for 3 years. He wants to get out and go to college, which I totally don't blame him. That's what I did. So he's got a plan, and being a tomb guard is not in that plan. So. Yes, ma'am.
Are there other guards that are actually looking for intruders while you're so focused?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when you have that duty-driven focus, you don't have all that being able to look around. You can't put your head on a swivel, so to speak. So there are cameras on top of the memorial amphitheater that point down towards the mat where the guard is. It can also pan the crowd. It can zoom in on people if there's someone that's suspicious. There's a guard shack on the plaza itself that has a phone that goes directly down to the tomb guard quarters. So if we as guards see something while we're on duty, we'll go into that shack, we'll pick up the phone, we'll call and say, "Can you either send people up to take a look or call the military police to come out to further look at somebody. So. Yes. Hi. Yes, that's
First-
right. We were supposed to use the mic. I'm sorry.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And it was very impressive, and thank you for doing that today. I'd like to ask a question about, I saw on the screen it said something about 12 poems. What do the poems have to do with this?
Yeah, so it was required knowledge, like the Sentinel's Creed. There were other poems that were created over the years, just in honor of the unknowns and their sacrifice. Some of these poems you can find within Arlington National Cemetery. They're actually, there's a final resting spot of many remains of unknown soldiers from the Civil War that are underneath a tomb. And I don't know the poem exactly, but the poem starts off, "Beneath this stone repose the bones of 2,111 unknown soldiers from the Civil War." I don't know anymore. I used to, but I don't right now. So, but different poems that really are meaningful towards the unknowns and obviously the engagements that our military have been involved in over the years. So, yeah. Oh, I need the mic, right? Yes. Oh, I got it. Here you go, sir.
Has there ever been any indication whatsoever what service the unknowns might have been from?
I don't know. I know that, the Vietnam unknown, you're lucky to be able to make an identification there. And people ask me if any other unknown would ever be identified, and that's...
I just meant the service that they might have served.
Yeah, no. Never told to me, anyway.
No more DNA back then.
Right, no, no. Any other questions, folks?
Do you know which theater, Atlantic or Pacific, the World War II unknown came from? Was, one of them was selected, but I don't know which one.
No. I think it's not only, it wasn't known to the person making the selection as well as those who, for good reason, because, who
Right.
knows what type of bias might have been, whether this soldier came from the Atlantic Theater and wanted to make that selection based off of their service.
So in your training, you had to find 150 headstones or stones. Was Audie Murphy one of them?
Yes. Yeah, section, either 46 or 48, I should know that, I think it's 48. But, yeah, the most decorated soldier in World War II, Arlington Murphy, right?
Who are some of the other prominent soldiers buried there?
Not only soldiers, but Supreme Court justices. William Howard Taft, who was also president, but also a Supreme Court justice. Richard Todd Lincoln. What's that? Yeah.
And two of his wives.
Oh, okay, two of his wives. Oh, he's lucky. He's well protected. So, obviously President Kennedy, who you watch different videos about Arlington, and the uptick in visitors really made huge gains once President Kennedy was interred there. The popularity of Arlington and the notoriety of Arlington really took form then.
So what about Maureen O'Hara? She was married to some general, I think she's buried there with her husband.
Okay.
She, the actress, the movie actress.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Glenn Miller, you guys hear of Glenn Miller? He's buried there. He was actually in the Army.
That's right.
Could go on and on. Geez, you're really sparking up.
Yes.
I gotta study for my next presentation with you guys.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate it. And one more time, thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us. we deserve a crowd 1,000 times the size of this, but we were glad that all of you showed up here today. So thank you.
Groups are good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to hand it off to Steffi with Project Grace.
Hello, hello. Thank you all for coming. It is our great privilege and honor and to have Chief Mark here in our town, and that he accepted this invitation to speak today and share such a moving and heartfelt time of his life with all of us. In recognition of his dedication and his integrity and wonderful heart, Project Grace is making a couple of honorarium donations to the Travis Mills Foundation and to our very own Libby Mitchell, American Legion Post number 76 here in Scarborough. And we wanted to recognize Chief Mark with these very, very small but heartfelt donations. And thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Steffi, and thank you to Project Grace for putting all this together and making these donations to our veterans in need. So, thank you very much for attending. Have a great day. Thank you.